Alright, now that I've got the oil and the coolant drain from the bottom, I've removed the negative terminal on the battery, and I've removed the air cleaner, and now I'm going to turn the engine to top dead center, which may not specifically be necessary in my case, but I'm going to do it anyway. I'm going to remove the distributor cap, the spark plugs, and if you don't know where your spark plugs go, it's a good idea to number them. I would start 1, 2, and 3 from left to right. And now I am removing the distributor cap. With a flathead screwdriver. And in my case, I have one more screw to remove from the top of the cover. And now I'm going to crank the engine to top to the center, where cylinder 1 is at its highest point, and this has to be facing upward towards cylinder 1. Okay. And it's hard to see, but over here we have this marking right here. You can see that mark. It needs to be lined up with this hole in the cover. And now I'm going to remove these 4 bolts on this cover and this one here, and I'll be right back. Alright, so the 4 bolts are off, or the 4 nuts on top, and I'm removing this top cover, doing it on the PCV valve, and putting it off to the side. Next, I'm going to remove the timing belt, which is, I remove this bolt down here. And once I pull this timing, I'll show you right here. Okay, this has to come off, and I'm going to pull that bolt out, and once it loosens up the tension on the belt, I'll pull the belt off, and I'll be right back. Okay, so now that I've taken off the belt, and that's by releasing the tension down here by unscrewing the tensioner, and then the belt just slides right off there. Next, I'm going to remove this exhaust manifold right here, and there's 3 screws, 2 of them already off, and then I have 2 more here and 1 more over here, and I'm going to replace the lift bolt. That way I can pick the whole head up, and after I remove this exhaust manifold, I'm going to remove the 8 bolts that hold the head on to the engine. And once I get those out, I'll be right back. All right, I'm back, and I removed the exhaust manifold, as you can see here, and I replaced the engine hoist. I forgot what they're called. Anyway, next up, I'm going to remove these bolts here, these two center ones, and these two over here. And over here on the distributor, there's one up here, and then there's one below. And I am going to take those out, and I'll be right back. Alright, so I got these off. It's just two bolts at the top, and there's one here. There's one here. Once you pull those off, the cam kind of just pops right out. But just comes off like that. That'll give me access to my intake and air valve. And I went ahead and just lit up this in here. I don't have to replace it, so I'm just going to leave it here. Next, I'm going to remove all 6 of the tops of the cylinders, the valves, and I'll get back to you as soon as that's done. Also, I'm going to go ahead and hoist up using this pin right here. I'm going to pick it up enough so I can get down at the gasket and clean out the old gasket and all the material and residue that's stuck to the block. I'm just going to use a plastic scraper for it and get it all cleaned out, and I'll get back to you here in a minute. Okay, so I've gone through and I've cleaned up the old gasket, and I've also removed the top of the valve springs. And what I have here is I have a come-along attached to the engine hoist mount, and up here I have my A-frame. I just brought it into the garage, and so that allows me to get to the underside without having to remove all the stuff off the carburetor. And like I said, I cleaned out that area, pretty much both sides. And now I'm going to be removing the each of these valves and replacing them with the new valve and new seals. So I'm going to go ahead and do that next. And before I do, I want to come back here in a minute and show you how I'm removing these. Okay, so what I'm doing to remove each of these valves is taking an oversized socket, and this one's 3/4, placing it on the valve and hitting it pretty hard with the hammer. Usually takes a few times, but the keepers and those things right there, those tiny little things are the keepers, and they tend to go everywhere, so you have to be really careful about catching them, making sure that they don't go flying, because they're hard to find. But once you release those keepers, these two pieces, your spring and your retainer clip get pulled out of the well, and down there you still have that seal that has to be replaced. But how I'm doing it is this piece of plywood between the head and the crank, and I stuff a towel in there to keep it in place. But that's really there just to protect the surface of both the head and the crank. But they tend to come out pretty easy, this exhaust valve, through the bottom. And that's what they look like. And they're not in too bad a shape, but since I have to replace those seals, I decided to go ahead and replace the valves as well. And here's my new valve, which will go in right now. And I'm going to go ahead and replace that seal as well down there at the bottom. But once the new valve seal spring goes back in it, and I'll show you how to put the keepers back into place. So I put the new valve, the exhaust valve, back in, and I put a little bit of oil and put that seal back in as well. See if I can show you. And in order to get to set into place correctly, I just used a small socket, a deep well socket, pressed it in there just a little bit so it get it set in there. And then I'm going to go ahead and replace the valve and the spring. And this is kind of the tricky part. What I'm going to do is use, because I don't have the right tool, I'm using a C-clamp. And I'll go in through the bottom here with this end of the C-clamp and use a small piece of PVC, if I can find it, to hold it in place and press it down. That way I can get the two keepers back into place. So I'm going to go ahead and get that all set up, and I'm going to show you how it's done. Okay, so to give you an idea of how I'm trying to get these keepers back into place, I just use a C-clamp, and I put a rag between the C-clamp and the face of the camshaft top head. And if you can see down in there, that's just a piece of PVC, and pushing down on a quarter, and you can see right there, those are the keepers, and they're set into place. All I gotta do is come off of it and they should be retaining okay. And that's how I got the first one in there, and that's how I'm gonna do the other ones. I have 4 left to do, so I'm gonna go ahead and take care of those, and I'll come back after the job's done. Next, I'm going to be replacing the cylinder springs, and in order to do so, I'm going to have to get into the bottom. While the intake manifold is off, it's a good time to go ahead and get that taken care of. And I've ordered the parts. I have them. I hope they're the right size. I'm just using the standard size. They make larger ones in case you want to bore out your cylinder. I'm looking at the cylinders. They look like they're in pretty good shape. It doesn't seem to be a whole lot of wear here. I did a compression test. I'm getting about 150 across the board. Generally, 190 is about ideal. So it really doesn't need it necessarily, but I'm going to go ahead and do it while I'm here anyway. So I'm leaving I'm going to try it without the alternator, without taking off the alternator belt and without removing the exhaust manifold. In order to do so, I'm going to have to go in through the bottom and remove the oil pan. And to do that, I'm just going to remove all the screws that go around it. And while I'm at it, I'll probably try to remove that dent from the bottom. But I'll get back to you as soon as all these bolts are removed and this thing's cleaned up a little bit. A couple things I have to discuss in regards to the white smoke I'm getting out of the tailpipe. The white smoke is actually kind of a bluish color. It's the oil that's dripping into the cylinders. And this is kind of how you can tell. This right here is my cylinder 1, and that one was perfectly fine. The big problem was with the cylinder 2. And one thing I noticed about it is there's a lot of buildup on these inlet intake valves. And cylinder 3 has a little bit as well, but not nearly as much. Cylinder 2 is a big problem, and that was because of the seals. And you can tell that there's going to be a problem just by looking at these. And that's kind of what to look for if you have white smoke. But the other thing is, on these gaskets, this is a cheaper gasket. I got it on online for about 20 bucks. And well, it seemed like a good deal at the time. There's actually a big problem, and you can see it with this and with that. These are the oil return holes, and if you take a look at the difference between the two, that's how big they are. They're pretty much almost all sealed up, and when these get sealed up like that, there's not as much return back to the oil pan, and this thing tends to clog up with the oil. You get a lot of it up here and here as well. And without the return, you're getting pooling up here, which allows it to drip down into the air intake valves. So if you decide to use one of the cheaper gaskets, then you're going to have to drill these out. And that was probably the reason why I had the white smoke. And I wanted to go ahead and point that out to you guys. I got the oil pan off, got it cleaned up, and got a layer of rust inhibitor put on it. And I got some of the dents knocked out, basically the best I could. Looks pretty good. And then going down here under the car, back at the engine. See if I can show it to you. I thought this is pretty cool. This is the filter for the oil for the block. And I'm going to go ahead and just blast that out with some air, get that cleaned out a little better. And I forgot to mention over here, there's 2 screws, one on either side, that has to come out. This is the transmission here, and that's a side panel for it. There's 2 screws there that will release these 2 bolt holes. That way you can pull the oil pan down. And you also have to drop your oil sensor. There's just 1 bolt right here that you're going to have to pull off. And here's our underneath is our pistons. But this one right here is number 3. And there's 2 bolts here that I'm going to take off. This one right here is number 2. Same 2 bolts. And back here in 1, way up there at top dead center, is piston number 1 with 2 bolts. So the exhaust isn't in the way at all, so it can just be left there. And those bolts are going to have to come off, and then that should be able to allow the pistons to come out of the engine without ever having to take the alternator belt off. And it should be just fine the way it is. So I'm going to go ahead and take care of those things, and I'll keep you updated. So after I removed the bottom piece of this piston with the 2 nuts on either side, they come right out real easy. There's nothing to it. They lift right out of that, just like that. One thing worth noting is if you look at the face of these, they can show some minor wear. But this one, this middle piston, looks like it had a piece of metal break off and was bouncing around inside of there. I noticed a lot of metal stuck inside here. So I'm going to remove these. They look like they're in pretty good shape, but I'm going to go ahead and take them all off, remove all those internal pieces, clean it out really good, clean these up a little bit, and I'm not going to do any polishing or boring in the piston wells. So I'm just going to go ahead and throw these other rings back on there and call it good. Even though it's pretty worn on this side, it's not going to affect performance at all. I'll just have to make sure to watch out for this edges, make sure those are all still usable. And so I'm going to go ahead and get these cleaned up and put back in there and get them tightened back down. One thing that I wanted to mention while I was here, and I just said that I wanted to leave that the oil filter in there, but I ended up taking it down so that I could get the nuts off the crank. But putting them back on, the pounds per square inch is about 40, and you're going to need to know that number so that you can torque them back down. But I got all the pistons back in, and I got this gasket area cleaned up so that I can RTV that bottom part of the oil pan. And so I'm going to get this back in here and put the oil pan and then put the oil pan back on, get all these nuts on, put this cover back on here for the transmission, and put this oil plug back in, and I should be good to go down here on the bottom end of the vehicle. Okay, so I got the tire off. I put it up on a wood block, and for the purposes of making this video, I went ahead and replaced. I took out the battery and the bracket, and it was pretty simple. It was just 1, 2, 3 bolts. It came right out. This will help me so you guys can see it better. But this is the fifth gear housing, and there's around the perimeter, there's a whole bunch of bolts. They look like they're about 10 millimeters. All those have to come out. Make sure the fluids are drained, or you're going to leak everywhere on the floor. And like I said, the tire had to come off, and you can see it pretty well. You can get a pretty good visual down here, and that's that right there. But so it's up to you which way you want to decide to go as far as working on the unit. But I'm going to go ahead and get that cover off, and I'll be right back. And here is our fifth gear assembly. The cover came off, and in addition to those 10 millimeters, there was 2 12 millimeters on the bottom. And from the top view, this is what the fifth gear assembly looks like. When it engages, this pulls in towards its transmission and engages the fifth gear. And you can do a visual inspection from this point to see what the condition of your fifth gear is, simply by looking at this big one over here towards the middle is your gearing. And it doesn't look too bad, but it's popping out. And you can see that's popping out because it's rounded. Here's what a good one looks like. Maybe you can see the difference between the two. Regardless, it's going to have to be changed out. And what needs to happen next is I'm going to remove this right here with an Allen wrench. And then down here on the underside, you're going to have a ring plier. You can see right there. I'm going to have to pull that off with a pair of pliers, ring pliers. And after that, I will get back to you. Alright, once you get to this point, the next step after you take the Allen wrench is to pull out this little tiny ball here with a magnet, and be careful you don't lose it. It's pretty important. But after that, this cotter pin here has to come out, and this one is actually kind of challenging, and it's probably going to take me some time. But after you get that cotter pin out, there's one more lock ring right there that you're going to have to take off. So I'm going to take that off, remove this cotter pin, and I'll be right back. Okay, so I got that ring off this side right here, and I got this cotter pin out, and that turned out to be the most challenging part of this whole thing. And how you deal with this is it actually presses right through. So from the top up here, up top, you can get a coat hanger or something and put, hammer it down, and it'll fall down to the ground. You just got to be careful that you don't lose it. And from that part, this whole assembly comes off as one unit. But you want to be careful when you take it off. You want to keep everything together so you don't lose anything. And thankfully, I'm not reusing this fifth gear kit because it just came apart on me. It can be put back together, but it'll make it a lot easier if I just keep it all together. And from that part, this will come off. That doesn't look good. Okay, I see what's going on. Looks like those bearings will have to be reused. Those look like they just slide right in there. Like so. Alright, that feels pretty good. Alright, thankfully mine came intact, but you can tell how to do it because the teeth have to be directed inwards. But before you do that, you have to put your synchroning pin on there. I believe just like that. And then I believe that goes over the top after you put the outer housing on. So okay. And I think that's it. I'm going to go ahead and go double check all this, make sure it's right, and I'll get back with you. The last part I wanted to mention was this right here. And make sure that goes back on there before you push it in any further, so none of the pieces pop out of there. But now that before you push this in, go ahead and put this lock ring on first, and then you can go ahead and put that cotter pin in, and there's another cotter pin that goes here, another lock ring that goes here, and you probably put that marble back in there, and you should at that point be able to push the entire assembly in, and it should connect and lock up pretty well. So I'm going to go ahead and take care of all that, and I'll mention anything I missed here in a moment. Here we are, the fifth gear is in place. Worth noting is that this ring down here is actually pretty challenging to get in if it's not properly aligned, especially with the synchro bearing. That has to be aligned, and everything has to be installed correctly in order for this ring to go in. So once everything is in correctly, this goes in pretty easy. But after that, I got that marble back in that place. I got the cotter pin hammered back into the position, and I got this back in here, and there's also this little tiny ring right here. But after I put it in there, I went ahead and went into the driver's seat and engaged it in fifth gear, and everything looks like it's doing well. None of these pins are popping out on the side or anything. So I'm going to go ahead and pop it out of fifth gear. As you can see, everything looks good. I don't see anything that's going to cause any trouble. So I'm going to clean up this area a little bit. I'm going to RTV the cover and put the cover back on, and refill the transmission full of hydraulic fluid, and I should be good to go. That was pretty much it. And I'm back. I got the gasket in place, I've got the gasket in place, and now I'm going to go ahead and put the head back on the crankcase. And as you can see, the two return oil ports, it's a much better fit. I think I'm going to open this up a little bit better, but this one over here is perfect. And this right here is a Felpro, and it's labeled by indicated by top on this part. Put the two pins in place on either side so that the gasket will stay in place when you put the cover back on. And what I'm going to do is just lower it back onto here and put the long bolts back in place in kind of a kitty zigzag configuration, maybe like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 to help keep it from warping when you tighten it down. But it gets tightened down to about 54 pounds, I believe, pounds per square inch or pound psi. I'm not sure what the newtons are on it, but it comes out to about 54. And so I'm going to go ahead and lower the head back on here, get it bolted down, and I will be right back. I got the head back on the crankcase, and it's ready to put the camshaft back in. I've got these that I set aside, so I'll put these on top of the lifters, and I put all the bolts in the for the head gasket. I put them at 54 foot-pounds, so it was foot-pounds and not psi. And I did a staggering motion, so they so everything went together. It looks like just fine. The cam is ready to go back in, and from that point, I should be able to put these three back on, hopefully in the order that they got taken off. One thing to keep in mind is on the cam, have that mark right there toward facing upwards, so that it fits inside here at top dead center. And so once those are aligned correctly, both at top dead center, then you can put those back on and tighten it back up. And once all those are in, should be ready to about ready to go ahead and put the top cover back on. And I'll be right back with you. All right, I got the timing cam on, put back in, put these three posts here holding the cam in place, making sure it's fit in with the distributor, and make sure that the distributor is top dead center, pointing at cylinder number 1, at spark plug number 1. And same over here, making sure I got the seal back in there. If you're doing a complete rebuild, you probably want to replace that seal, but mine was good, so I just left it alone. Tighten these down. Same with those two. And then I put the ground back in, which is down here. See if I can find it. It's right here. That's the ground. Goes into the back. Fits right onto here. I put that bolt back in there. Put the ground back on. And I put this bolt in here too, making sure that the distributor is tight fitting with the camshaft. Now we're ready to put the head back on, which will require some more of these. I got four new of these things, whatever they are, and those will go on each of these posts, securing the top, making sure no oil spills out of the top of that cover. And then once the cover's back on, you come over here, make sure that mark is facing towards the top notch right here. Making sure that those two are lined up. And once they're at top dead center, since the crank hasn't been moved at all, I should be able to put this right back on there, and the timing should be still the same. And hopefully I won't be off a tooth, otherwise it'll run like crap. It's kind of a difficult thing to do, to make sure that you're on the exact tooth that it needs to be. So you have to play with it a little bit sometimes. But as soon as I get those things done, we'll get back with you. And then can also put back on the distributor cap and run my spark plugs back into the run the cable back into the spark plugs. And also, I have my exhaust manifold can be put back on after I take this bolt back out. And once I have all those tightened up, I'll get back with you. All right, I'm back, and I got it back together. Got the battery back in, and the air cleaner back on, and I put regular clean water inside the radiator in order to flush the system before I actually put antifreeze in there, because whatever gasket material might be left over, I wanted to make sure that I could flush that out, so that I just put clean stuff inside there. And so I have it. Looks like I have everything ready to go. I'm gonna go ahead and try to start it, turn it over, see if it'll start. And it's not started. And I'm not sure what the problem is. So I'm gonna have to go through it a little bit, do some inspecting, and see if I can figure out what's going on with it. I'm back, and the car wouldn't start, and maybe I figured out why. I've got poor compression on the center cylinder, so I'm thinking maybe I caused some type of problem uh, with the two seals on either side of cylinder 2. So I'm going to go ahead and check those seals, take this all back apart, check the seals. Another thing I did, and I really didn't know better, because I'm not a mechanic. But these cylinder walls, I went ahead and threw some lithium axle grease in there, just some lithium grease. And the reason for it is because it was awfully hard to turn over. These new rings, I guess they're really tight and they take a while to break in. So I went ahead and coated the cylinder walls with lithium based grease. They call for assembly lube, but that's what I had, so that's what I'm using. It turns over a little easier now, so I think I'm going to go ahead and be okay. So I'm going to go ahead and take care of these couple of issues, and we'll give it a try again and see if I can get this thing started.